Talia Mosley had one hand on the wrapped hostess gift and the other hooked through the strap of her canvas school tote when Graham parked in front of his parents' house. He leaned over and smiled like this was supposed to be simple. Just dinner, a few school people, his family acting proud of him for bringing her around. Talia wanted to believe that, she really did. But her tote was heavier than anything in her hands should have been. Bus passes. Evelyn's clinic reminder. A car repair estimate she had folded twice and still couldn't stop thinking about. Student loan mail, grocery coupons, and thank you notes from parents at Brookridge, tucked beside the gift. She checked her face in the dark window, smoothed her coat, and told herself she was only here to be treated with basic respect. Graham squeezed her shoulder. Talia breathed once, then walked with him toward the door. Diane Whitaker opened the door before Graham could knock, polished and smiling like she had been waiting in that exact spot. Inside, the living room looked less like a family gathering and more like a soft little command center. Donation envelopes sat near name tag stickers. A school community planning table had been set up by the window. Diane kept adjusting a tray of small sandwiches while watching who drifted toward whom. She brought Talia in with a hand at her elbow and said, "Everyone, this is Graham's girlfriend, Talia. She works over at Brookridge and is just wonderful with families." It sounded warm. It also made Talia feel like she had been placed on a shelf marked helpful. Graham looked pleased, but he didn't add that she was the family resource coordinator. He didn't correct the shape of the introduction. Talia smiled anyway, quiet, already listening harder than she was talking. Olivia Raines found Talia before Talia had even taken 2 full sips of coffee. She had a color-coded folder under one arm and the bright, busy energy of somebody used to being thanked. "I'm so glad you're here," Olivia said. "We're trying to get better turnout for resource night. And you probably know which families need rides or reminders." Talia heard the little claim inside it. Which families? Like they belonged to her because nobody else had bothered to learn how to reach them. She opened her tote and pulled out a folded list with bus routes, pantry hours, translation needs, and the times certain parents could actually answer the phone after work. Olivia kept talking about sign-up sheets and nicer flyers. Talia gave her the pieces that mattered. Don't call during shift change. And don't put food help on a public sheet. Olivia nodded fast. Perfect. You're such a help. Talia folded the list back up. Dessert was when the questions changed shape. Diane slid a plate toward Talia and asked, very gently, where her mother lived and whether she was still working. Claire leaned in with her coffee and turned it into planning. If everybody keeps getting closer, we just want to think through holidays. Parking, introductions, all of that. So nobody feels out of place. Talia heard the soft edge under it. She said, "My mother, Denise, is a home health aide. My grandmother, Evelyn, is retired. She ran a school cafeteria for years and helps with the church pantry." Diane smiled like she was taking notes she would never admit to taking. "Oh, that's very hardworking," Claire nodded. "That explains why you're so practical." Graham stayed beside Talia, quiet, treating it like family interest. Talia answered only what they asked after that. No extra polishing. No little stories to make them comfortable. Robert lifted his glass like he was about to make a toast, and the whole little circle gave him room. That was how men like him got away with things. They smiled first. "Well," he said, "between a grandmother who ran a cafeteria and a mother in home care, I guess Graham found somebody who knows how to keep people fed and checked on. Might save us some money when we get old." A few people laughed right away. Forks clinked against plates. Somebody near the planning table gave a soft, surprised little chuckle, then kept going when Diane smiled like it was harmless. Robert added, I'm kidding, before anyone had even objected. But Talia heard exactly what had been said. Evelyn's work had become a punchline. Denise's tired feet and double shifts had become family banter. Graham sat beside her. The room waited for Talia to laugh too. She didn't. Talia set her water glass down with both hands. Not hard. Just carefully enough that the table noticed. Her fingers went back to the strap of her tote. And she looked at Robert first, then Diane. "You're laughing at my grandmother feeding children at school," she said. Her voice was low, steady. "And at my mother taking care of people in their homes." The room lost its easy noise. Robert blinked, still wearing the leftover shape of his joke. Now, Talia, I was just kidding. She did not move to rescue him. That's what the joke was. Nobody could say they had not heard her. Diane's smile thinned. Claire looked down at the seating notes near her elbow. Olivia suddenly became interested in her coffee. Talia felt Graham next to her. Close enough to speak, close enough to make it right. Graham reached for Talia's hand under the table. His thumb pressed once against her knuckles. The way he did when he wanted to calm her down without saying anything out loud. Then he cleared his throat. Dad didn't mean it like that, he said, quick and soft. Before Talia could even turn fully toward him, he added, Anyway, Mom, are we still short tables for resource night? I can bring some from the job site if you need. Diane took the opening like it had been set on a plate. That would be wonderful, sweetheart. Robert gave a relieved little chuckle. Olivia started talking about setup times. Someone asked if there was more coffee. The room slid away from what had just happened. Talia left her hand where Graham had taken it. But inside, something stepped back from him. He had heard every word. He had chosen the room. On the ride home, Graham kept his eyes on the road and used the careful voice he used when a problem had parts he could organize. I know that got awkward, he said. My dad runs his mouth. But they mean well. My mom really wants you to feel included. Talia's tote sat between her feet, open just enough for Evelyn's clinic reminder and a stack of parent thank you notes to show. Graham kept talking about family nights, about giving people time, about not making one comment bigger than the whole evening. Talia watched streetlights pass across the windshield. Finally, she said, You heard him. Graham sighed. I did. I just didn't want it to turn into a thing in front of everybody. That was the answer, even if he didn't know it. Talia looked down at the papers in her bag and gave him no comfort to lean on. The next morning, Talia still had to move. She stood at her small kitchen counter sorting the pieces of her life into piles. Evelyn's clinic reminder, grocery coupons, a car repair estimate she could not make smaller by staring at it, and a student loan notice she had only opened halfway. Her phone buzzed with a message from a Brookridge parent asking if bus passes were still available that week. Talia answered that first. Last night was not staying in Graham's car, or Diane's living room, or Robert's little joke. It was right there, mixed in with the appointments and bills and people depending on her. The work they had laughed at was the same kind of work keeping her family and half her day from falling apart. She packed the clinic paper and coupons into her tote. She was hurt, but she was not going to fall apart before breakfast. Denise's kitchen smelled like coffee and laundry soap when Talia came through the side door. Her mother was already in motion, checking her shift time, writing down a pharmacy pickup window, and asking whether Talia's car was still making that clicking sound when she turned left. If it gets worse, don't play with it, Denise said. We'll figure out another way to get your grandma. Talia nodded, but she was too quiet. Denise stopped with one hand on the grocery list and looked at her. What happened over there last night? Talia tried to wave it off. It was just uncomfortable. Denise's face did not change. I didn't ask if it was comfortable. I asked what happened. Talia looked at the table, at the coupons and pill bottles and Denise's work shoes by the door. They made jokes about your job, she said. And Grandma's cafeteria work. Denise went still. That one sound carried plenty. By the time Talia got to Evelyn's apartment, Denise was already there, sorting pharmacy receipts into a neat little stack. Evelyn sat at the table with her pill organizer open, clinic papers beside her, and the old cookie tin near her elbow. She was reminding them that Mrs. Albright still needed a pantry box before Thursday. Talia had not planned to say much, but Evelyn looked at her long enough to make hiding feel like disrespect. So Talia said, carefully, that Graham's father had made a joke about the cafeteria and home health work. Evelyn did not flinch. She opened the cookie tin and touched the handwritten cards inside. She said she had fed children who came to school hungry, and that was not a small thing. Denise went quiet in the way that meant she had plenty to say, and was choosing her first words with care. Talia looked at those cards and felt the joke get uglier, because now she could see exactly what it had tried to make small. Graham's text came while Talia was loading grocery bags and Evelyn's clinic forms into the car. She had one bag balanced against her hip and the trunk halfway open when her phone lit up. He wanted to talk later. His mother felt bad that things got tense. He hated that Talia had left upset. She read it twice, standing there in the parking lot with cold air pushing through her thin sweater. Nothing in the message said his father had been wrong. Nothing said Denise's job or Evelyn's years in that cafeteria should not have been turned into a joke. His mother felt bad. Things got tense. Talia was upset. The words made the whole thing smaller and softer, like the room had somehow gotten hurt instead of her family. She put the phone in her coat pocket without answering. If she replied right then, she knew she would end up taking care of Graham's guilt before he had even named what caused it. At Brookridge, Talia tried to move like the morning was normal. The copier jammed before 9. The emergency snack drawer was almost empty. 3 parent calls were waiting on the log. Renee caught her in the hallway with a stack of referral forms pressed to her chest and gave her one look. She asked who had done what. Talia let out a breath that was almost a laugh. But not really. She told Renee the cleaned-up version first. Then the real one, Robert's joke, Diane's smile. The way everybody waited for her to play along. Renee listened without blinking. Then she asked what Graham had done. Talia's mouth tightened. He had squeezed her hand and changed the subject. Renee nodded once, so he heard it. Talia looked away. Renee did not tell her what to do. She just said his silence was part of it. And for the first time, the sentence sat in the room exactly right. A little before lunch, a Brookridge parent came to Talia's office doorway with her coat still zipped and her voice low. She needed help getting across town for a clinic appointment. But she was embarrassed to say why in the front office. Talia did not send her to 3 different desks. She pulled a bus pass from the blue envelope, wrote the pantry referral on a plain sticky note, and made a quick clinic note so the child would not be marked late for something the family could not control. You don't have to explain it all again, Talia told her. I've got it written down. The woman's shoulders dropped like she had been holding her breath all morning. Renee watched from the hall and said nothing, because she understood. This was what Denise and Evelyn had taught Talia, not shame. Care with sense behind it. Graham found her near the school parking lot after dismissal. Holding 2 takeout coffees like that could make the conversation gentler. Buses were still lined up along the curb, and Talia kept checking the time because she had to pick up Evelyn later. He said he was sorry about last night and hated that it had felt so uncomfortable. Talia took the coffee but did not drink it. She asked what part he was sorry for. Graham shifted his weight. His father could be careless, he said. He joked when he did not know what to say. But they really did like her and he did not want her judging them off one bad moment. Talia looked at him then and asked if he had heard what Robert said about her grandmother and her mother. Graham's face softened, which somehow made it worse. He had heard it. He just did not think his father meant it that way. There it was again. He was putting his father's intent over what had actually been said. Talia kept her voice calm and told him he kept apologizing for the night being awkward, while she was talking about what he allowed to stand. Later, at the laundromat, Denise folded her home health scrubs on top of a warm dryer while her phone kept lighting up with somebody needing a medication refill. Somebody else needing a ride. Talia told her what Graham had said, including the part about his family not meaning it. Denise listened, tucked a sleeve into place and let out a tired little breath. Baby, I have swallowed plenty because rent was due and you needed shoes, she said. That was survival. It wasn't me saying folks had a right to talk down to me. Talia leaned against the washer and looked at her mother's hands. The same hands that worked long shifts and still knew who on the block had eaten. Denise softened. You can endure a thing and still call it wrong. That stayed with Talia. Peace with Graham could not mean pretending her family had not been insulted. That evening, Evelyn opened the cookie tin again, but this time she did not just show the cards. She told the stories behind them. She remembered which children came through the cafeteria line hungry before testing days. She remembered which family got a casserole after a hospital stay. Which cafeteria balance she quietly covered. Which pantry box had to be delivered after dark so nobody felt exposed. She gave full names and dates like she was reading from a ledger no one else had bothered to keep. Denise sat beside her, nodding at some parts and smiling at others. Talia listened until the anger in her chest settled into something steadier. Robert Whittaker had made it sound like Evelyn had just worn an apron and served trays. He had no idea how much memory, judgment, and mercy had passed through those hands. Talia knew then she would not let anybody make those women into a punchline again. Graham came by Talia's apartment that night, and they sat in her parked car because she did not invite him upstairs. Her tote was between them, clinic papers and one folded thank you card, showing at the top. He kept waiting for her to soften first. She did not. The problem wasn't only what your family said, Talia told him. It was that you heard it, sat there, and let it stand. Then you wanted me to leave calm so nobody had to feel bad. Graham's face tightened. I didn't want to make it worse. For who? She asked. He had no quick answer. Talia kept her voice low. My mother and grandmother are not material for jokes. They're not a curiosity test. They're not something your family gets to inspect before deciding I fit. He looked ashamed, but shame was not repair. For once, Talia let the silence make him sit with that. Graham nodded like he understood, but the words he chose told Talia he was still standing a few feet away from the truth. He said, I'll handle it. I'll talk to my mom. Not, I'll say what happened in front of the people who heard it. Not, I'll tell my father he was wrong. Just handle it. Soft and private, the way families handled mess when they wanted the room clean but not honest. Talia did not argue. She also did not reach for him when he got out of the car. A minute later, her phone lit up. Olivia Raines had sent a bright little message asking if Talia could help connect the PTO with some Brookridge families for the next resource night. Talia stared at it. The same circle that treated her roots like something to smooth over still wanted the doors those roots could open. She locked her phone without answering. The next morning, Talia unlocked her office at Brookridge with her mind still full of Graham's careful promises. The building was already busy, phones ringing in the front office. A child crying near the nurse's door, somebody asking where the extra copier paper went. Talia set out the bus passes, checked parent voicemails, and opened Olivia's spreadsheet. The turnout column was highlighted in bright yellow, with a note asking for family confirmations by Friday. A front office assistant poked her head in and said, Olivia's been asking if you saw the list. Talia said she had. A few minutes later, Olivia appeared with her tablet and a smile that was all urgency. We just need help connecting with your families, she said. Talia looked at the spreadsheet, then at the messages waiting on her phone. I'll look at what families actually need first, she said. She would do her job. But she was not going to let someone else's panic become her proof of worth. By mid-morning, Talia was at the PTO planning table with Olivia, Claire, and 3 volunteers who all had matching badges clipped to their sweaters. The table was covered in color-coded sign-up sheets, snack donation lists, and little piles of stickers for name tags. Olivia smiled at Talia like she was grateful and in charge at the same time. You are always such a help, she said, then slid a form across the table. Could you give us a sense of your families? Who needs rides? Who uses the pantry? Who might come if we call? Talia looked at the paper before she looked back up. Your families. Like Brookridge parents belonged to her only when somebody needed access to them. She said she could not hand out names or needs like a mailing list. She could help set up a respectful process. Privacy first. Opt-in first. Real transportation information first. The smiles around the table got thinner. Before Olivia could press again, a parent appeared near the doorway and caught Talia's eye. Talia stepped into the hallway with her, away from the table and the open office traffic. The woman kept her voice low. She needed help with transportation and food support. But she did not want her business passed around on a volunteer sheet. I came to you because you don't make people feel small, she said. My auntie said your mama's people were always like that. Talia felt that land quietly. She checked the pantry hours, pulled a transit pass from her drawer, and wrote an attendance note so the child would not be punished for an adult problem. Renee passed by, saw the whole exchange, and gave Talia one quick look that said she understood. Back in the conference room, the PTO was waiting for numbers. Out here, a family was trying to keep its dignity. When Talia returned to the planning table, Claire was tapping her pen against the room layout. She had already marked the donor table near the entrance and put refreshments where the photos would look best. Talia pointed out that some parents worked late, some needed childcare, and some would not ask for pantry help if the request had to happen in public. Claire gave a careful smile. We just don't want the evening to feel too complicated, she said, or make guests uncomfortable. Olivia nodded like that settled it. Talia's face stayed still. Transportation, privacy, and food are not complications, she said. They're the reason some families can come at all. A volunteer looked down at her notes. Claire's pen stopped moving. Nobody had said anything openly cruel, but Talia heard the old ranking underneath it. The comfort of people with options was being treated like a plan. The needs of working families were being treated like a mood problem. Olivia took Talia's suggestions and made them prettier, which was not the same as making them useful. The new flyer had smiling children, cheerful wording, and a big headline about community connection. But the bus pass information was gone. So was the line telling parents they could request pantry support privately. Olivia held it up like a finished product. This feels less heavy, right? She said. Then she added, almost casually, could you do some calls tonight? After work, maybe? They listen to you. Talia felt the trap in that sentence. If she said no, families might miss help they needed. If she said yes, Olivia got to keep treating her trust like extra volunteer labor. Talia asked for the old resource details to go back on the flyer. She agreed to call only the families who had already asked for follow-up. Then she opened a document and started writing down every request Olivia had made. Renee found her after school with emergency snack packs in one hand and referral forms in the other. She leaned against Talia's office doorway and watched her add evening calls to the calendar. So they want your relationships, Renee said, but not your authority. Talia kept typing for a second before she stopped. Families still need the help. I know, Renee said. That's why they count on you swallowing it. Same way folks love the care but look down on the women who taught it. Talia sat back in her chair. She thought about Robert's joke. Diane's soft questions, Olivia's smile, Claire's room layout. Different rooms. Same habit. People welcomed the labor and then questioned where it came from. Talia opened a new folder on her desktop and named it for the event. She was not going to chase credit, and she was not going to hand over trust without a record. If they wanted her work, they were going to see the boundaries around it. That afternoon, Ellen Porter called Talia into her office. Ellen was careful the way principals learn to be careful. With a closed door, a calm face, and a folder already open on the desk. Inside were attendance notes, pantry referral logs, transportation forms, and parent feedback sheets. Talia saw her own name in the margins again and again. Sometimes in Ellen's handwriting, sometimes in a parent's. Ellen tapped the top page. I want you to know this is not invisible to me, she said. The family outreach numbers changed because of your follow-through. Talia appreciated hearing it, but she did not relax all the way. Proof, sitting in a folder, had not stopped Olivia from treating her like a handy contact list. So Talia said, then I need the process to match the record. No more informal asks for access to families. It needs to go through a respectful plan. Ellen nodded and wrote it down. Near dismissal, a parent came by Talia's office with a folded note pressed flat between both hands. She said she could not stay long because she had to catch the bus. But she wanted Talia to have it. The note thanked her for helping with a clinic form and a pantry referral. Then the woman smiled and said, You Miss Evelyn's granddaughter. Right? Full name Evelyn Mosley? Talia looked up. The parent remembered breakfasts before testing days. Remembered pantry bags tucked aside without a child being embarrassed. Remembered Denise giving somebody's aunt a ride when there was no one else to call. Talia held the note a little tighter. Renee, passing by the doorway. Heard enough to understand. The background the Whitakers had looked down on was something Brookridge parents still remembered. Talia did not make a show of it. She just thanked the parent and put the note safely in her tote. After school, Graham came through the side entrance carrying folding tables for the event. There was sawdust on his jacket, and on another day Talia might have smiled at how quickly he handled practical problems. Olivia spotted Talia before Graham even set the tables down. Can you maybe call a few more families before dinner? She asked. Claire added something about firming up numbers for the room setup. Graham glanced at Talia, then at Olivia. When they were alone in the hallway, he said, I think they're just trying to organize everything. His voice was gentle. That almost made it worse. Talia looked at him and waited to see if another sentence would come. One that named what he had just watched. It did not. She did not explain the whole history to him right there. She picked up her folder and let his answer tell her what he still could not see. By Thursday afternoon, Olivia's spreadsheet told him the whole plan. The attendance column was almost empty. One volunteer said half the numbers were disconnected. Another said parents had not called back. A third looked embarrassed and said, a few asked if Ms. Mosley was part of it before they would say yes. Olivia's smile tightened. Claire started talking about reminder emails. Diane suggested a warmer subject line. Talia stood at the end of the table and let them hear themselves. Then she said, families are not a list you pull from. They answer when they trust what happens after they answer. The room went still. Talia kept her voice even. That trust came from showing up, keeping people's business private, and doing the work before there was an event attached to it. Olivia needed her to fix the problem. Talia could see that. But she was not going to be treated like borrowed access. Ellen did not let the moment float away. She updated the planning notes while everyone was still at the table. Transportation be listed clearly. Pantry requests would be private. Outreach would name Talia's role instead of hiding it under general volunteer language. When Talia made the next round of calls using that process, parents began responding. Not all at once, not like a miracle, but steadily. A mother confirmed because she could ask for help without saying it in front of a room. A grandfather signed up after hearing there would be bus passes. A pantry partner called back once Talia's name was attached to the list. Olivia tried to smile it into a team success. See, when we all pull together, she said. Talia did not argue, and she did not thank anyone for finally doing what she had said from the start. She let Ellen's notes, Renee's witness, and the growing sign-up list sit there together, plain as receipts. Later, Talia sat in her car with the engine off and the tote open on the passenger seat. It was not neat. Nothing in her life was neat right then. There were bus pass stubs, parent notes, pantry reminders, a folded thank you card, and Evelyn's clinic reminder with the time circled twice. She used to think of that bag as just the thing she carried because somebody always needed something. Now it looked like a record, not fancy, not official, but real. These were the pieces of care the Whitaker Circle kept using, while acting like the people who taught it to her were something to explain. Her phone lit up with Diane's name, and Graham was copied on the message. Something about the upcoming school event and making introductions comfortable. Talia read the preview once and did not open it yet. She was not going to answer, as if Diane got to set the terms. When Talia finally opened Diane's message, the words were soft enough to sound harmless if you wanted them to. Diane wrote that Family Literacy and Resource Night would be a lovely chance for everyone to come together. Then she asked whether Denise and Evelyn might attend. She said they could plan ahead. Maybe think through introductions, seating, and what would help everyone feel comfortable. Talia looked at the event flyer on her seat, then at Evelyn's clinic reminder and the parent notes tucked beside it. There it was again, dressed up as kindness. Before Denise and Evelyn had even decided if they wanted to be in the room, Diane was already managing how they would enter it. Talia did not answer from the parking lot. She locked her phone, sat with the feeling in her chest, and understood this was not a courtesy question. This was about access. Graham called that evening while Talia stood in the grocery aisle comparing store-brand soup and checking the balance in her account. Her car was still making that clicking sound, and she was trying to decide if one more week was possible before the repair appointment. He sounded careful. Mom thought the event might be a good reset. He said, just a fresh start. A quiet do-over. Talia put a can back on the shelf. A do-over for what? Exactly? Graham paused. For the tension. For everybody feeling bad. What is she correcting? Talia asked. And who is she correcting it in front of? He let out a breath like she had made it hard on purpose. I don't think it has to be some announcement. That told her enough. He still wanted the door open without the public truth standing in it first. Talia took the question to Evelyn's apartment, where real life did not pause for anybody's feelings. She checked the brakes on Evelyn's walker while Denise sorted pharmacy receipts into piles on the table. Evelyn listened, then asked the first practical thing. That school got chairs close to the entrance? Talia said yes, they could make that happen. Evelyn nodded. All right, now tell me what those people said. Talia did not give them the cleaned-up version. She said Robert had joked about cafeteria work, and Denise's home health job had been folded into it, like both women were funny little facts from Talia's past. Denise stopped moving the receipts. Evelyn looked at Talia for a long second. I fed children, she said. Denise added, and I help people stay alive in their own homes. Talia swallowed. I know. And I'm not letting anybody bring you in there to make themselves look gracious. The planning call started with Diane saying she only wanted to be thoughtful. Claire had the program in front of her and talked through parking, the donor table, the PTO welcome station, and where mobility seating might go. None of that was wrong by itself. Talia knew accessibility mattered. But the way they kept circling Denise and Evelyn made it sound less like care and more like containment. We just don't want any confusion, Claire said. Diane added, the smoother we make it, the more comfortable everyone will be. Graham was on the line too, quiet in that familiar way that made Talia's stomach harden. She waited until they finished. Then she asked, why do my mother and grandmother need special handling beyond a chair near the entrance and basic respect? The line went quiet. Diane gave a little breathy laugh and said they were only trying to be welcoming. Talia did not laugh with her. Then the task list came up and the polite language slipped. Olivia read through greeters, readers, resource runners, snack setup, and photo volunteers like she was calling out bingo numbers. Diane said, maybe Evelyn would feel at home near refreshments. Given her cafeteria background, Claire followed too quickly. And Denise might be wonderful at the wellness table. With her home health experience. Talia looked at the copy of the list in front of her. Denise and Evelyn's names had been penciled beside jobs they had never been asked to take. Graham shifted, but he did not interrupt. Talia did. No. Nobody spoke. She kept her voice calm. My grandmother is not coming to be stationed by snacks. My mother is not unpaid staff for a wellness table. They have not even agreed to attend. And if they do, they come as my family. Diane started to say it was only an idea. Talia said, it was an assignment. At school, the same pattern showed up on paper. Ellen called Talia into her office and handed her the draft program for Family Literacy and Resource Night. The first page thanked the PTO, the donors, the volunteers, and the community partners in bright, broad language. Talia's name appeared in a small line near the bottom, telling families to see Miss Mosley for transportation questions. Olivia, standing near the door, said, we try to keep acknowledgments simple. Talia looked from the program to Ellen's folder of referral logs and outreach notes. Simple is not the same as accurate, she said. If my role is where families are being sent, then the outreach needs to be recorded correctly. And my family is not part of PTO optics. Ellen nodded and made a note. She did not dress it up. I can document the responsibilities as they were handled. She said that was enough for the moment, not praise. A record. Graham caught Talia outside her apartment just as she was trying to get everything upstairs in one trip. A laundry bag hung from one arm, Evelyn's groceries pulled at the other, and a folder of school forms was tucked under her elbow. He reached for the grocery bag and she let him take it. But she did not let that soften the conversation. My mom is trying, he said. I just don't want the event to turn into a loyalty test. Talia stopped on the step. It became a loyalty test when you weren't loyal in public. His face tightened. That's not fair. What's not fair is asking me to protect your family from embarrassment after they embarrassed mine. He looked away toward the parking lot. A public correction at a school event would humiliate them. Talia adjusted the folder against her side. They were comfortable saying it in front of people. Now they want to keep the correction quiet. That night, Talia sat at her kitchen table with everything spread out in front of her. Rent reminder, car repair estimate, Evelyn's appointment schedule, a notebook she usually used for grocery totals and school call lists. She wrote the boundary down before anybody could talk over it. Denise and Evelyn would not attend any version of that event managed by the Whitakers unless the disrespect was named publicly and the way they spoke about the Mosley family. Changed, not hinted at. Not softened. Named. She stared at the page for a while. Because she knew what it might cost. Graham might call it hard. Diane might call it rude. Claire might call it bad timing. But Talia knew herself. If she did not put the words somewhere solid, she might be tempted to make them smaller for peace. And peace had already asked too much of her family. Diane's dining room looked ready for a meeting that wanted to pretend it was a peace offering. Coffee cups sat beside event folders, and the old seating chart still had marks near the side entrance where Talia's family might be placed. Graham sat close enough to seem supportive but not close enough to challenge anyone. Talia looked at Diane, Robert, and Claire. Before we talk about the event, I want you to say what happened. Diane folded her hands. I'm sorry the evening became so tense. Robert cleared his throat. I made a joke that didn't land. I hate that feelings got hurt. Claire added, I think there was a misunderstanding and we all want to move forward. Talia waited. What was the joke about? Robert's eyes dropped to his coffee. Diane said, we were only trying to get to know you. That was the answer. They wanted credit for sitting at the table, not responsibility for what they had done there. By the time they were all seated at Diane's dining table, the careful apologies had started bending into defense. Diane kept smoothing the napkins beside the event folders. Like if the table looked right, the conversation would too. We have tried to welcome you, Talia, she said. I hate to think Graham is being punished when all of us want this to work. Robert leaned back and gave a weak little chuckle. Nobody meant anything by it, we were joking. Claire glanced at the program draft and said people would notice if there was tension at the school event. Graham sat there, jaw tight, still hoping the room would settle itself. Talia listened until the pattern was clear. They wanted her to be grateful for being included, quiet about being insulted, and careful not to embarrass the people who had embarrassed her family first. Talia pulled her hand away when Graham reached for it. She did not snatch it back. She just removed it, clean and calm, and looked at each of them. You made my grandmother's cafeteria work into a punchline, she said. You did the same with my mother's home health work. Then you started planning where they should sit, how they should be introduced, and what jobs might make them comfortable, like their presence was a problem to manage. Diane's mouth tightened, but Talia kept going. That is not a misunderstanding. That is disrespect. She pointed to the seating chart on the table. Denise and Evelyn will not be brought into this as proof that you are welcoming. Private regret does not fix public harm. If there is repair, it starts with public truth and different behavior. Until then, my family is not available to this room. Talia left before Diane could turn the conversation into another round of explaining herself. She did not wait in the doorway for someone to approve her boundary. She picked up her bag, told Graham she was going home, and walked out with her shoulders steady. Behind her, Diane's voice went lower, but not softer. She told Claire that Talia was hurt and not seeing how hard everyone had tried. Then she texted Olivia about keeping the school event calm, in case emotions complicated the program. Robert muttered that people could not joke anymore. Graham stood there long enough to hear all of it. He did not correct the word emotional. He did not say difficult was the wrong story. And that silence told on him too. Talia drove home knowing she had told the truth, and knowing Diane was already trying to make the truth sound like trouble. Back in her apartment, Talia opened her tote on the kitchen chair and took out the papers one by one. The school event folder went on one side. Evelyn's clinic forms went on the other. She was done letting those worlds get mixed together for somebody else's comfort. She emailed Ellen before she could talk herself into waiting until morning. Denise and Evelyn were not to be used in the program. The seating plan, the welcome language, or any photo-friendly version of inclusion. Family outreach needed to be documented, respectful, and tied to actual resource needs. Not PTO convenience. A few minutes later, Graham texted that he would talk to his mother again. Talia looked at the message and set the phone face down. Another private conversation was not a plan. It was just another place for the truth to be softened before it reached daylight. The next planning meeting looked polished at first. Printed programs sat in neat stacks on the conference table. Donor name tags were clipped in rows. Olivia had a coffee urn order. Claire had a volunteer sheet, and Diane had that calm host face she wore when she wanted a room to follow her lead. But the details were not holding. The transportation column had more blanks than names. The sign-up list was thin. The pantry partner had sent 2 follow-up messages asking who was actually coordinating the boxes. Olivia kept saying they were close. Diane said the evening just needed a smooth flow. Talia read through the pieces that affected families and left the rest alone. She was not there to save their image. If rides are not confirmed, some parents won't come, she said. If pantry requests are public, people will skip the table. The room got quiet because nobody had an easy answer for that. Then Olivia slid over a revised floor map. Talia's table had been moved near the copier room, away from the main entrance. The PTO welcome table stayed up front with flowers, donor signage, and the big basket of children's books. This might keep things simpler, Olivia said, too bright. Families can still find you for bus passes and pantry forms. And the front won't feel crowded. Diane nodded like that settled it. Claire added that everyone would be more comfortable if the resource questions happened off to the side. Talia looked at the map long enough for the room to feel her silence. If my role is changing, put the reason in the planning notes, she said. And family resource decisions still come through a private, respectful process. Olivia's smile tightened. Ellen wrote it down. Talia felt the sting of being moved out of sight. But she did not ask to be welcomed back to a place that had just shown her its terms. The problem with pushing Talia to the side was that the work did not move with the map. By lunch, a pantry partner had left a voicemail asking if Miss Mosley was still handling the list, because the names they received did not match the families who had actually requested help. A parent texted Talia directly and said she was not putting her business on a public sign-up sheet. Another ride fell through because nobody had checked whether the grandmother doing pickup could drive after dark. Olivia kept saying they just needed more follow-up. Talia heard what she really meant. Fix this for us. Talia took a breath, called the pantry back, and corrected only what protected families from being exposed or left out. She copied Ellen on the changes. She noted where the mistake started. She would not let families suffer, but she also would not make Olivia's carelessness disappear. Later that afternoon, a mother came by Talia's office with a folded note in her hand. She said she had not planned to come to the event until she heard Talia was connected to the resources. Then she looked at the nameplate on the desk and smiled a little. You Evelyn Mosley's granddaughter, right? Ms. Evelyn used to make sure my oldest had breakfast before testing days. Talia's throat tightened, but she kept her face steady. The woman went on, naming Denise too, saying Denise had once driven her aunt to a clinic appointment after a long shift because nobody else could get off work. Renee stood in the doorway, quiet for once. Talia took the note and said, I'll make sure your request stays private. She did not wave the story around. She did not turn the woman into evidence. But she kept the note. Because other people were starting to say the truth without Talia having to push them. By late afternoon, Talia sat in her office with the door half closed and the lights feeling too bright. The after-hours call list was still there. So was the student loan letter she had not opened. A granola bar wrapper from what was supposed to be dinner. And a reminder for Evelyn's next appointment. Renee came in, took one look at the desk, and said, You thinking about walking away from this whole thing? Talia rubbed her forehead. I'm thinking about how they keep making me choose between myself and the families. Renee did not rush to answer. Talia picked up the call list, then set it back down. I'm not abandoning people to make a point, she said. But I'm not disappearing so Olivia can call it teamwork either. That was the line. She would help through records, boundaries, and clear process. Not through silent sacrifice. Graham found her in the school parking lot while she was loading her car. Resource folders went in first, then a grocery bag for Evelyn. Then the little pharmacy reminder she had almost forgotten. He looked at all of it and still opened with, I talked to Mom. Talia shut the trunk slowly. He said Diane felt bad, and everybody was tense, and maybe if they could just get through the event without making it public, there would be time to fix things after. Talia looked at him across the roof of the car. You keep acting like public truth is the problem, she said. The harm was public. The jokes were public. The way they tried to move me out of sight is public. Graham's face fell, but she did not soften it for him. Asking me to wait is asking me to protect their comfort again. He had no answer she could trust. So Talia got in her car and drove toward Evelyn's, where at least the truth did not need coaching. At Evelyn's table, the air felt different. Not easier, exactly, but honest. Pill bottles sat near a church bulletin, and Denise had a stack of receipts pushed to one side so Evelyn could open the cookie tin. Inside were thank you cards, old pantry notes, and ledgers with names written in Evelyn's careful hand. This one, Evelyn said, tapping a page, needed groceries the week her lights got cut off. This child here ate breakfast with me every testing week. Talia listened, quiet. The dates were not decoration. They were memory with proof attached. Denise watched her face and said, Don't let them make you feel like you have to prove we're human. Records can back up what happened. They don't decide what we're worth. Talia nodded. She could use what was written without putting her mother and grandmother on display for people who should have known better. The next morning, Talia sat across from Ellen with a folder in her lap and no extra softness in her voice. Ellen had referral logs, attendance notes, pantry emails, and parent feedback forms spread across her desk. Talia added her own notes from the failed outreach and the parts of Evelyn's ledger that connected to school and pantry history without exposing anybody's private hardship. "I'm not asking for praise," Talia said. "I'm asking for the record to be accurate." Ellen looked over the pages for a long moment. "I can state what the documentation supports," she said. "No more and no less." That was all Talia needed from her. Not saving, not a speech. Just the facts in a place where Olivia's version had been floating around like it was settled truth. Talia left the office with some relief, but not comfort. Facts could help. They could not protect her all by themselves. Olivia's email went out before lunch, full of bright subject lines and cheerful language about PTO leadership, community spirit, and a welcoming night for Brookridge families. Diane replied almost right away, thanking everyone for showing what inclusion looked like. Claire added a note about keeping the evening smooth. Talia read it once and felt the old heat rise in her chest. Then the replies started. A parent asked whether Ms. Mosley was still handling transportation. A staff member asked where the private pantry request process had been moved. Another parent wanted to know if Talia was the contact for resource signups, because that was the only reason she felt comfortable coming. Talia did not jump into the thread to fight for credit. She forwarded the message to Ellen with 3 short corrections and attached the notes they had already reviewed. Let the record answer. She was not going to argue for visibility while they packaged her work in public. By the next planning check, the folder had gotten thicker without Talia having to make a show of anything. Renee printed parent messages and set them beside Ellen's referral logs. A pantry partner had left a voicemail asking if Mrs. Mosley was still the contact, because families were waiting on her process before giving names. A staff log showed the same thing in a quieter way. Calls returned when Talia's name was attached. Talia added 2 dates from Evelyn's ledger and 1 thank you note from a parent. But she covered the details that belonged to somebody else's hardship. She was not about to expose families just to prove Diane wrong. Still, the pattern was sitting right there, different papers, different voices, same truth. People were responding because the Mosley women had earned trust long before Olivia printed a flyer. At the pre-event review, Ellen placed the folder beside the final program draft and waited until everyone was seated. Olivia had her volunteer list. Diane sat with her hands folded. Claire kept a pen ready like she could organize her way out of discomfort. Graham stood near the wall, quiet. Ellen began with attendance and turnout, then moved to pantry access, transportation, and parent follow-up. Her voice stayed even. The increase in confirmed participation is tied directly to Ms. Mosley's outreach process, she said. The pantry and ride coordination also relied on relationships Denise Mosley built through rides and meals, and on Evelyn Mosley's years of school and pantry work. Nobody could pretend they had not heard it. Talia did not smile for them. She did not soften the silence. She let the facts sit on the table with the programs and sign-up totals. Graham looked at her, but she kept her eyes on the folder. Diane was the first to try to shrink it. She said the evening should not become about one family. Olivia picked that up fast and started talking about teamwork, community effort, everybody doing their part. Claire leaned over the final program with a pen and said they had to be mindful of how things would look. Graham stood close enough to speak, but he did not. Not yet. Talia watched Claire mark the page like the problem was wording. Then she said, accurate is not the same thing as praise. Olivia paused. Talia kept her voice calm. And my mother and grandmother did not need a folder of proof before they deserved respect. Nobody had an easy answer for that. The facts were no longer hidden. But Diane and Olivia still wanted the benefit of correction without admitting what they had been correcting. That night, Talia packed her tote slowly. The final program went in first. Then the redacted parent notes, copies from Evelyn's ledger, bus pass forms, and the clean clinic reminder she needed for the next week. It was strange seeing all of it together. Bill's care work, proof, school resources, family history. All the things people treated like background until they needed them. She called Denise to confirm Evelyn's ride plan, and Denise asked, "You all right?" Talia looked at the toad on the chair. "I'm steady," she said. "Not fine, not untouched. Steady." Graham had texted, asking if they could talk before the event. Talia did not answer right away. The next room would show her enough. Diane, Olivia, Graham, the parents, the staff. All of them would have to choose what they did with the truth now that it could not be kept quiet. Brookridge's cafeteria looked ready before it felt ready. Folding chairs lined the floor. Book tables sat near the front. Pantry boxes were stacked along one wall. And bus pass envelopes were sorted in neat little piles. Olivia moved around the PTO welcome table with color-coded lists, while Diane adjusted donor name tags like that could settle the air. Talia walked in with her canvas tote on her shoulder and her boundary already in place. She saw Graham near the folding tables, Robert beside him, Claire checking the program, Ellen with her folder, and Renee watching everything with that look that missed nothing. Talia did not wait for anyone to tell her where she belonged. She set her materials where families could actually reach her, checked the sealed forms, and made sure the resource table had space for private questions. The room looked polished, but the tension under it had not gone anywhere. It did not take long for the room to show who families actually trusted. A mother signed in at Olivia's table, took a ticket for a children's book, smiled politely, and walked straight past the color-coded folders to Talia. "Miss Mosley, y'all still doing the bus passes in the blue envelopes?" she asked, like last semester. Another parent waited behind her with a pantry question he clearly did not want to ask in front of the PTO volunteers. Talia answered quietly, pointed people toward the right forms, and made sure nobody had to announce private business just to get help. Olivia tried to wave families back toward the welcome table, but they kept finding Talia anyway. Renee caught Talia's eye from across the room. She did not grin, but her look said enough. The proof was happening in real time. The first real problem came from a clipboard. Olivia had put out a public sign-up sheet with columns for pantry boxes and rides. Like families were supposed to write their need in front of neighbors, teachers, and donors. One parent saw it, froze, and started folding the paper she had been holding. Talia stepped in before the woman could leave. She closed the clipboard and said, "We're not doing it this way." Olivia blinked. "It's just to stay organized." Talia kept her hand on the clipboard. Not with people's food and transportation needs out in the open. She moved the conversation to a quieter hallway table and replaced the sheet with sealed request cards. Renee brought envelopes without being asked. The parents stayed. Olivia looked embarrassed, then irritated, but Talia did not hand the clipboard back. Access was not access if it made people feel ashamed for needing help. A little later, that same parent stood near the book table with a reading packet tucked under her arm and spoke to Ellen like she had been holding the words for years. "I came because Miss Mosley said it was set up right," she said. Then she looked toward Talia, "and I know that name. Ms. Evelyn used to know which kids needed breakfast before test days. Didn't make a big thing of it either." She nodded once, like the memory still mattered. "And Denise Mosley got my aunt to a clinic appointment after working a whole shift. Folks remember who shows up." Talia felt the words land, but she did not grab for them. She only thanked the parent and kept the line moving. Denise and Evelyn were not standing there to be displayed, but their care had entered the room anyway, carried by somebody who knew its weight. Diane heard it and tried to make it smaller without sounding like she was. She touched the stack of programs, straightened the corners, and said, "It really is lovely, all the humble service people bring from different backgrounds." Claire jumped in right behind her, pointing toward the refreshments. "We should probably keep things moving before the schedule gets away from us." Talia looked at Diane first, then Claire. Graham was close enough to hear every word. Talia did not raise her voice. "What do you mean by humble?" she asked. Diane blinked. "I just meant generous." Talia held her there. "When you're talking about my mother and grandmother's work, what makes it humble?" The room did not stop, but the air around them tightened. Diane wanted to praise the Mosley women in a way that still kept them beneath her. Talia was not going to help her do it. Ellen stepped to the microphone before Diane could smooth the moment away. She had her folder with her, the one with the redacted parent feedback, referral logs, pantry confirmations, and the corrected program. Her voice was calm, the way it always was when she had documents to back up every word. She thanked the families for coming, then said the turnout that night was connected to Talia Mosley's resource work. Her parent outreach and the community trust tied to Denise and Evelyn Mosley's long history of care. She named transportation, pantry access, and private family follow-up as parts of that work. Olivia's smile held, but it changed shape. Diane looked down at her program. Talia stood near the resource table and let the facts be facts. She was not going to thank anyone for noticing late. She was only glad the record no longer ignored what people already knew. Olivia moved quickly once Ellen finished. She reached for the microphone with that bright fundraiser smile and turned toward the PTO banner like she could pull the room back into safe language. "This is really a team effort," she said. "So many volunteers made tonight possible." Then she looked at Talia with the donor photos still happening near the book table. "Talia, would you like to say a few words about helping families?" Talia understood the offer. Olivia wanted her visible, but only as the inspiring helper. Not as someone owed accountability. Talia shook her head. "No. Thank you." Her voice stayed even. "I won't use family's needs or my family's name to make the program feel smoother." The smile on Olivia's face tightened. Renee looked down at the table like she was trying not to say something. Graham heard it too. Praise was not going to cover what still had not been corrected. That was when Robert stepped in with the same easy voice he had used at Diane's house. "Now come on," he said. "This all started over a joke that got out of hand." Diane added that everyone had tried to welcome Talia from the beginning. Claire glanced toward the parents waiting for sealed pantry cards and lowered her voice like Talia was the danger. No one wants the school night to become uncomfortable. Children were still turning pages at the book table. Volunteers were stacking extra chairs. People were close enough to hear. And for once the Whitakers could not count on the room knowing only their version. Talia went still. She looked at Robert, then at Diane. Then at Claire. Her voice dropped. "You keep calling it a joke because that lets you skip what you were laughing at." Graham stood right there between them, with nowhere left to hide. Graham finally shifted like he was about to step between them. But even then he reached for the smallest words first. "Mom, Dad, the comments were unfortunate," he started. One hand stayed on the back of a folding chair. He looked at Diane, then at Talia, like he wanted someone to make the sentence easier. Talia did not help him. She had already spent too much of the relationship translating what grown people meant and softening what they refused to say. The chatter around the cafeteria thinned out. A few parents stopped pretending not to listen. Graham swallowed. "I know it got tense," he said. And that was still not enough. Talia let the words sit there. Unfortunate, tense. None of those words named contempt. None of them named silence. And now his hesitation was not happening in a car or a kitchen. It was happening in front of everybody. Before anyone could fold the moment back into manners, the proof around them kept speaking. Renee set a stack of redacted parent messages beside Ellen's folder. A pantry partner confirmed that families had asked whether Mrs. Mosley was handling the list before they agreed to come. One parent said she trusted the sealed cards because Talia had never made her feel exposed. Another pointed to Denise's ride network like it was common knowledge. Ellen's records matched the stories. Attendance calls, pantry emails, transportation notes. Parent feedback. Different pieces, same truth. The event had worked because families trusted the Mosley name and the way Talia protected them. Diane could not call that a misunderstanding. Olivia could not turn it into generic teamwork. Graham looked around the room, and for once there was no comfortable middle for him to stand in. Talia felt the timing settle. She did not need to prove herself. She only needed to say what was already clear. Talia spoke from beside the resource table, where the bus pass envelopes and sealed pantry cards were still in neat stacks. Her voice was low enough that the room had to quiet down to hear her. "At your house, my grandmother's cafeteria work and my mother's home health work were made into a punchline," she said. "When I said it was disrespectful, I was treated like I was the one causing trouble." She looked at Robert, then Diane, then Claire. And Graham heard it. He changed the subject. No one moved. "Tonight, this room has heard how much of this school's trust came from the same kind of work you look down on. You don't get to benefit from it. Praise it when it helps you. And then call me oversensitive for protecting the women who taught it to me." Talia let that land. Public disrespect does not get fixed by private regret, nice words, or a smoother program. Graham let go of the folding chair. For a second, he looked like he still wanted someone else to start the hard part for him. Then he turned toward Diane and Robert, not Talia. Talia is right, he said. His voice was rough but clear. Dad. It wasn't just a joke. You made her grandmother's cafeteria work and her mother's home health work something to laugh at. Mom, you treated it like something that needed to be managed. Claire, you did too. Robert's face changed because nobody was laughing now. Graham kept going. I heard it that night. I changed the subject. I protected our comfort instead of defending Denise and Mrs. Evelyn. Talia stood still and let him say it. She did not move toward him. It mattered that he finally named it. But it did not undo what his silence had already cost. The night kept moving, but the room was not the same. Parents picked up sealed resource cards. Children left with books tucked under their arms. Ellen made notes for the corrective program record, and Olivia stayed busy at the welcome table without owning the room the way she had before. Diane's smile appeared and disappeared in pieces. People still came to Talia with questions. But now they said her name differently, with the respect that had been there in the community all along. Talia placed the parent notes back in her tote beside the program and the clinic reminder. Graham came close and said, "Can we talk?" She looked at him for a moment. Not tonight. There was no anger in it, and no invitation either. The truth had been spoken. The Mosley name had not bent. But what Graham had earned, and what he had lost, would not be decided in the middle of everybody else's discomfort. Talia stayed until the last practical thing was handled. She sealed the final pantry request cards, counted the bus pass envelopes, and made sure no family's private need was left sitting out on a table. Diane lingered near the doorway, trying to leave with her posture still polished. Olivia busied herself with leftover flyers. Graham waited close enough for Talia to feel the question in him. But she did not turn her evening into comfort for him. She texted Denise that Evelyn's ride was covered, then slid Ellen's corrected program into her canvas tote. Renee came beside her and asked, "You good?" Talia breathed out. "I'm done for tonight." That was all she gave. Not a debrief, not forgiveness. Not a soft landing for anybody's guilt. She walked out when she was ready, with her keys in her hand and her boundaries still intact. At Evelyn's table, the room felt different from the cafeteria. Pill bottles sat beside grocery bags, a church bulletin, and the cookie tin where Evelyn kept thank you cards like family records. Talia laid the folded event program near the tin and told them what had happened. She did not dress it up. She told Denise how Graham finally named his silence. She told Evelyn that parents had spoken her name with respect. Denise listened with her arms folded, quiet in the way that meant every word was landing. Evelyn tapped one finger on the program. "Baby, that room didn't make me somebody," she said. "I was somebody before they learned how to say it." Denise nodded. Good, they told the truth. But you don't owe them your peace for it. Talia sat back, tired and relieved. Here, no one had to prove why they were proud. Graham came by the next evening, but he waited outside the apartment building, instead of assuming he could come up. Talia had a pharmacy bag for Evelyn in one hand and a folder of school forms under her arm. He saw both and looked ashamed, like he was finally noticing how much she had carried while he kept asking for calm. "I'm sorry," he said, "for the comments. For changing the subject. For making you explain it over and over. I wanted you to trust that I loved you. But I didn't act like it when my family disrespected yours." He did not reach for her hand. Talia appreciated that more than she expected. Still, she kept her distance. "What you said at the school was necessary," she told him. "But necessary is not the same as repaired." Graham nodded slowly, hearing the line he could not talk his way across. Diane's message came in while Talia had her laptop open to 2 car repair estimates and Evelyn's clinic on speakerphone. The words were polished, careful, and small. Diane said she was sorry things had become painful. And she hoped Talia might come to a quiet family dinner so they could all move forward. Talia read it once, then set the phone down beside her notebook. She finished scheduling Evelyn's ride first. Then she wrote her answer before she typed it, because she knew how easy it was to soften herself out of habit. "I'm not coming to dinner, so this can be handled privately," she sent. The jokes were public. The way you described my boundary was public. Any repair starts there. Graham called a few minutes later. Talia let it ring once before answering. If you support me, she said, don't translate that down for your mother. The follow-up email went out 2 days later. It was not warm in the way Diane liked things to be warm. But it was plain. Robert's cafeteria joke was named. The comment about Denise's home health work was named. The message said Talia's boundary had been unfairly framed as oversensitivity, and that was wrong. Olivia's event notes were corrected too, with Ellen's accurate acknowledgement of Talia's resource coordination and the Mosley family trust that helped families show up safely. Talia read it at her kitchen counter with her tote open beside her. Graham's name was copied on the message. So were Claire, Olivia, PTO volunteers, and the Whitaker Circle that had heard the other version first. Talia did not feel grateful. She felt the quiet steadiness of a record being set where it had been bent. The correction mattered. It just did not settle anything by itself. Now they had to show change in how they treated people. At Brookridge, the change showed up in paperwork first, which was exactly where Talia wanted it. Ellen called a short meeting with Talia, Renee, Olivia, and the front office staff. The new resource checklist had no public columns for who needed food or rides. Pantry requests went into sealed cards. Transportation planning had to be done before flyers went home. Not after parents were already embarrassed. Talia's coordination was listed where it belonged, not hidden under a general volunteer line. Olivia looked at the form and said, "This feels like a lot of steps." Renee's eyebrows went up, but Talia answered before she could. "It's the work," she said. "The part families feel when we do it wrong." Ellen nodded and kept writing. For once, Talia's judgment was not treated like extra emotion. It became the way the school would do the job. After dismissal, Graham asked if they could sit outside Brookridge for a few minutes. The buses were pulling away, and Talia's tote rested at her feet with the corrected program folded beside Evelyn's clinic reminder. Graham looked tired, but he did not look away. "I know I don't get to ask for things to go back," he said. "I just want to know if there's any path from here." Talia watched the last bus turn out of the lot. "The community seeing what my family did does not pay back what happened," she said. "My mother and grandmother deserved respect before there were records. Before parents spoke up, before anybody understood what the Mosley name meant to this school." Graham swallowed and nodded. Talia kept her voice steady. "I need distance. If there is ever a future, it will be because you practice public loyalty without using my family as your proof that you changed." A week later, Talia got one message from Graham while she was sorting groceries for Evelyn. He did not ask to come over. He did not ask if she missed him. He wrote that Robert had made another just kidding comment at dinner. And this time Graham stopped him right there. He told Diane not to call the public correction embarrassing. Because what embarrassed the family was the harm, not the admission. Then he added that he would not ask to visit Evelyn's apartment or speak to Denise unless Talia invited him someday. Talia read the message twice. There was a small ache in her chest. But it did not move her boundary. She set the phone face down and put Evelyn's low-sodium soup on the right shelf. Graham's effort could be real and still not become her responsibility. For now, the relationship stayed paused, and Talia let that be enough. The next Saturday, Talia took Evelyn to the pantry pickup with Denise meeting them after her shift. It was an ordinary morning, all grocery bags, folding tables, church ladies checking lists, and somebody's child asking for juice. A Brookridge parent saw them near the canned goods and smiled wide. "Miss Evelyn Mosley," she said, using the whole name like it mattered. "I still remember those breakfasts you kept warm for us." Evelyn lifted her chin, pleased but not surprised. A minute later, the same woman thanked Denise for connecting her cousin to a ride network after surgery. Then she turned to Talia and asked about the next school resource day, like she already understood how the three Mosley women were connected. Talia did not explain them. She did not tidy them up for anyone. She stood beside her mother and grandmother and let people meet them exactly as they were. On Monday, Talia walked back into Brookridge with the same canvas tote on her shoulder. It still held bus passes, grocery coupons, thank you notes, Evelyn's clinic reminder, the car repair estimate, and the corrected program folded into one side pocket. Her bills had not disappeared. Her grandmother still needed rides. Work still came with voicemails, parent worries, and forms that had to be done right. But something heavy was gone. She no longer carried the job of making her roots smaller so other people could feel generous for accepting her. Renee caught her in the hallway and gave her a look that said she saw the difference. Ellen nodded from the office, with a folder in hand. A parent called, "Miss Mosley," and Talia turned without shrinking. The Whitakers no longer got to decide whether she belonged. Anyone who wanted to be close to her had to respect where she came from. This one came to me through an email, and I kept thinking about Talia's tote more than anything: the bus passes. Clinic reminders, grocery coupons, and all that quiet proof of care nobody wanted to respect until they needed it. What stays with me is how calm she was when she stopped translating disrespect into manners. She didn't need that room to make her family worthy. She just made them stop pretending the harm was harmless. If any part of this felt familiar, tell me in the comments. And if you have a story with this kind of quiet breaking point, send it my way.